Good morning, everyone, and welcome into Rounding the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. I was about to say happy Monday. It is Tuesday. I hope you had a good, safe Labor Day. And this is always one of those holidays that never fully registers with me in terms of being a day off, because there's usually baseball. And so yesterday really felt like Sunday to me. Today feels like Monday, but we got a short week. And if you are in Kansas City and you walk outside today, which I haven't yet, but I'm going to shortly, it is a day to open up the windows. It feels as though fall has finally arrived. I don't know if it'll last or not. Seems like we always have a 90-degree day left in us, but this should be very refreshing. So I hope everyone has a great week. I've got a couple of guests today that have, I would say, a new partnership, but I would in some ways say new, but also continued, because they go back quite a ways. I'm excited right now to be joined by Joni Wickham and former Kansas City Mayor Sly James. And Joni, I'll start right with you. The partnership here of Wickham-James, I guess you guys just didn't have enough of each other over at City Hall?
Yeah, I guess not. I mean, we were term limited August 1, 2019, and this guy just kept walking behind me, asking me what he should be doing. So I thought, okay, let's start a business together.
Such a pest, Sly, such a pest.
Yeah, it works like that. We knew that we were going to do this for a long time, worked on it for over a year, got it down. One of the good things is, and it really shows, I tend to be more of a looser thought person, visionary type person. Joni is a person who organizes and gets things done, who has really good thoughts as well. So the two of us working together, we just continued the partnership that we had, where each of us kind of feel needs for each other and are very compatible with each other's skill sets. It's been great.
Well, you don't finish up working as closely as the two of you did as mayor and chief of staff and not want to pursue a new endeavor unless the chemistry and the beliefs and all of that are in line. Obviously, they were. So, Joni, tell me about the firm, how things have gone, and what it's like now creating a new business.
Well, I don't think either one of us anticipated running a new business in the middle of a global pandemic. So that has been a trip for sure. But we've continued to be very busy. Love the work that we do with our clients. We've been able to work on issues that we're really passionate about, things like women's leadership, climate change, education, leadership in general, things like that. So it's been great. It's been really nice to be able to continue working on issues that we're passionate about, but also having a bit more control over our lives. That was not something either of us necessarily experienced during the 8 years at City Hall.
Well, so I was going to ask you about that too. I mean, I think some would think that in a role as a politician or in the role of politics, that's where you can affect change, and of course you can. But this is a different route now, and I'm sure that there is less of the protocols, I guess I'd say it that way, of City Hall, the red tape, all of what I know you love in government so much. So how different is this to be able to tackle some of those issues from a different perspective?
Well, we learned one thing that I think is very important to this conversation, and that is that if we're waiting for politicians to make changes that are important in our lives, and we may be waiting forever, and even if they try in good faith to try to make change, it may not be the change that we really want. People need to really understand that they are the change agents, and working together outside of government, you can affect what goes on inside of government. So I really like the idea of being able to pick our subjects here, whereas in government, you don't. They pick you. I really like the idea of picking our clients, whereas in government, we had 475,000 clients, none of whom seem to have the same idea at the same time on any given day. But now we have a really an ability to focus on a particular issue and hopefully drive some change in that area. So I really like it like this, and it gives us a lot more freedom. And frankly, being in that office, Joni and I in that office for 8 years, sometimes you start to believe that your life really isn't your own, and this is a way of trying to get that back.
Well, it often is not your own, right? And so you
True
do
enough.
have that freedom now, but you also have the leverage of what you guys were able to do, Joni, over those 8 years. And so you're able to leverage that recognition and the results that you had. And and everything that comes with holding that office. And so, how has that worked for you in terms of leveraging those contacts, those relationships? It's not like the two of you started on day one and people said, "Wait, who are these guys?" They knew who you were. So how did that help you in hitting the ground running?
I think those relationships helped tremendously. I think my colleagues across the country know me well enough, and certainly Sly's the same way, that if we come to them with an idea, it's going to be an idea that we genuinely believe is going to make their life easier, help the communities around them. It's also been really interesting to see that after you have the experience that we've had for 8 years working under public scrutiny, a lot of pressure, some of the biggest projects that the city had undertaken in decades, like the airport, it makes you well-rounded, and it makes you have a unique skill set that you bring to the table. For example, I don't think either one of us shy away from controversy or big ideas, that sort of thing.
Right. I don't know. Sly's a little bit shy every now and then.
You know, that is probably the most seldom used word that when people describe me as shy, but I appreciate the opportunity to get it every now and then.
You know, there are some in the world that like to throw nicknames on people, whether accurate or not. But I don't think anyone's going to go with Shy Sly.
No, not today. Not generally. No, you know,
not
the relationships that we've had amongst mayors and governmental bodies and other organizations that service government is really quite key, because number one, you're 100% right. We didn't hit the ground brand new. We had an idea. We also had the credibility with our friends to be able to talk about things. But the other thing is that we had a kind of a unique understanding of what happens inside government, what government really needs, and how government can better partner with businesses from time to time in order to get things done. So we were able to see where there could be more of a nexus than there currently is, and it doesn't have to be either business or government. It should be a lot more both, combining in order to get things done. Public-private partnerships need to be expanded, not contracted, because they do work in a lot of instances.
I'm curious, and I'm sure that both of you have been asked this question in some form or another a million times, but you leave office and it looks like the world is coming to an end. And what I believe we're going to be okay, but we're in a moment right now in history on multiple fronts, right? With the pandemic and the protests and the racial injustice. It feels like doesn't just feel like things are moving in a different direction, and we'll see exactly how that goes. And so to both of you, are you happy to be out? Or the flip side of that is I know with everything that comes good and bad with being in office and all the red tape I mentioned and all of that, you also know that you have that ability. So is it good to be sitting back and saying, hey, Mayor Lucas, your turn? Or is there a piece of you, Sly, and then Joni that say, we wouldn't mind tackling this?
Actually, neither. And I'll tell you why. The fact that we knew we were termed out meant that we started planning ahead. And once we didn't look back and say, oh, gee, we wish. Secondly, we got a lot of stuff done. So if we had left office and had really not accomplished anything, then I might have regrets and Joni might have regrets. But we got a lot of stuff done. In the 8 years we were in office, we had 18 elections. And the one thing that I remember, I only remember the ones that we lost, not all the ones that we won. But the ones that we lost were significant issues. So I recognize that leadership leads through whatever the situation and circumstances are. That's just the way it goes. And that's what we are always prepared to do. I don't envy Mayor Lucas. I don't feel sorry for Mayor Lucas. I don't want to take his place or any of that stuff. I am content to watch him do his thing while we do our thing. And if there's a need for those two things to collaborate on some level, we're always happy to do that. But I've never looked back and said, gee, I wish. It just doesn't happen. Joni?
Yeah, there's not been 1 second of a single day that I have wanted to go back. I try not to do that in life in general, to look back with any regrets or anything, because I think that's a waste of time. I really love, like I said before, I really love having more control over my life. I have a little girl who just started second grade an hour ago virtually. And, and I have a husband who I get to spend a lot more time with. And so balancing all of that out, I wouldn't trade that to go back to City Hall.
Joni, speaking for all of the moms and dads in Kansas City around the world that are trying to work right now while their kid is in the next room in class. Truly, truly unique. None of us have experienced anything like this before. But that makes sense. I mean, Sly, we were talking before we went on the air, and I was talking about how I like it's a win or it's a loss. It's another day at work for me. It doesn't mean that I'm disrespecting the work. I think it's a pragmatic approach of saying, look, this is work. It's counterproductive to sit there and say, well, I wish I could or couldn't, or Joni, what you're saying of not looking back. I mean, it's just, I don't know. I get that, not having ever been in politics, just the practical end of that, like that work is done. You move on to something else, and it's someone else's responsibility at that point. So, Joni, I want to ask you, when I was reading up on your story, and you're obviously, we could hear it a little bit with the accent in there too. You're not a Kansas City native, but this is a place that you poured your heart and soul into too. How much did life change for you when you made the decision to come here?
Oh, it changed completely. I had been working at the state capitol in Jefferson City for about 5 or 6 years, and I came to interview with this dude named Sly James that I had never heard of before. True story, never heard of him. Had to do some research on him before my first interview, and I remember thinking that he just seemed different, just based on research that I had been doing on the internet. And then when we got together for our first interview, within 5 minutes, I was hooked. And I thought, if this guy offers me this job, I'm going to be here. And it was the best decision of my professional life for sure. And it changed everything for me, personally and professionally. I was able to really, I feel like, use my skill set to really shine for the first time. And it was interesting to me that once that happened, my confidence grew. I write in my book about how a lot of young women in particular experience imposter syndrome. And I think having somebody like a Sly James, a new mayor with all of this goodwill, believing in you and your skill set, it really sets you up for success. So it changed everything.
And Sly, I know that you are a believer in people, and I think you're a believer in everyone. I believe that, and I know that I've seen the way you interact with everybody, but there was clearly a connection here. And I know that Joni's giving you credit for, her confidence and all of that, but I'm assuming and willing to bet that that's gone both ways too. What has made this partnership, if not from day one along the way, so powerful?
Well, I was committed to a diverse office, and we simply didn't have anybody with accents. So we had to hire her. No, the thing that, look, I guess one of the things that I'm most comfortable in is I am comfortable with me. I know my flaws. I've come to grips with them. I know that I'm strong on some areas and weak on others. I look for people who will help make a good team, help be a piece of the puzzle that makes the picture really good. And then I don't tend to be a micromanager. I like people who are self-starters and able to get things done and have confidence about it and produce a good work product. She did all of those things from day one, always has. That's why we continue to be good partners. But she also, one of the things that she hasn't mentioned is that two things, actually. Number one, as chief of staff, she's responsible for staff. And that includes, in some instances, hiring staff, but certainly supervising staff. And although I was brought in to have major discussions with it and had a major voice in it, she managed people in our office, managed them well. And the proof of that pudding is that they still like her. They still like her. And I don't think that's necessarily true across the board. The other is that I needed somebody who was going to help rebuild the city in a way that it hadn't been. Not that it was torn down, but things needed to get done. And I needed somebody who had some guts and substance to help get it done. And she did. She had experience, but she also had this way of we often described our relationship as I'm the engine and she's the brakes. And it worked out that way very well because I'd really start moving fast and she'd be the one to point out the big curve in the bend that if I went around too fast, the train would be the rail. So it worked out well. I've not regretted a day of having worked with her, hired her, not regretting that at all. And like I knew very early on in the interview that she was going to be the one getting the job. It just clicked immediately.
I also heard you saying something in there about authenticity. I didn't know that was part of politics.
Well, it may not be as much of a part of politics, but it certainly should be a lot of leadership. And I always wanted to think of myself more of a leader than a politician. They're not mutually exclusive, but they're seldom combined. And that's an unfortunate circumstance. But I've always thought that if you are truly authentic and you let people know, even if they disagree with you on a lot of stuff, if you are consistent in who you are and who you portray yourself to be, but you are also empathetic and understanding of other people's needs, that you will have a life in government and politics because people, I think, are really looking for that. And I don't think that people think that you have to agree with them on every single subject. What they can't stand is when you act like you do and you really don't. You can't lie to them and expect to have them repay that with any sort of faith. You have to be honest and you take your lumps where you find them. And I've never been a person to hide how I feel about a subject. That's for damn sure. Just ask Kansas City Star; they'll tell you.
True statement.
This is very true. No, I've again never known you to be shy, and I think that's a good thing. By the way, so you both have new books out, and I want to talk about those, and then I want to talk about a bit of what's going on with Wickham-James and some of the projects that you're working on and some of what's important to you both. But Joni, let's begin with you. And I was reading, you said, you know what, I'm going for it. I'm going for it. And, I don't know, could the title have passed 10 years ago? Maybe not. I think nowadays people, that's awfully normal, but it's also extremely relatable. And so the thin line between cupcake and bitch, taking action, driving change, getting results. Tell me, I know everybody wants to talk about that title still. I mean, God forbid if you use the word bitch in a title, it's going to. So let's talk about how you came up with the title, but more importantly, your story and your background, which I know that you so candidly share in this book.
Sure. So the title was a bit easier for me than it was for some people because, frankly, it was my lived experience. It really has been. I've been in politics and government for about 22 years, which is unbelievable to think that I'm old enough to have done anything for 22 years.
It's not that hard to believe.
Thank God for Estee Lauder. But I'll tell you, there was one seminal moment where I thought, I've got to write this book, and this has to be the title of it. We were putting together a deal for this new convention center hotel downtown. And as we were leaving this one negotiation, two of the gentlemen in the meeting, I was the only woman, of course, two of the gentlemen in the meeting stopped me and asked me if they could chat for a minute. Of course, I say yes. One of them told me that I was way too bitchy and that I had alienated half the room. And the other guy told me that I was way too nice and the other half of the room steamrolled me. And I thought, well, both of these statements cannot be true. And there has to be something more to this experience than just these two older white guys, saying this to me. So I decided that I was going to write this book when I had more time. And I wanted to write a book that focused on leadership and communication, and not necessarily that one style is better than the other, but how men and women alike should focus on what they do well and figure out how to make their styles complementary with other styles.
And so how has the response been?
Unreal. I can't believe it. And I've really enjoyed hearing from men who read the book because a lot of the book are stories from my own experience where I wanted the reader to think about if they had found themselves in that same position, what they have done, what they have said, and maybe how they even subconsciously played into gender bias.
Well, and I think the other thing that's really interesting too, and a lot of people can relate, if people can't relate to the world of politics, most people have not walked in either of your shoes. They can relate to a woman that grew up as a girl that didn't have this background either, right? I mean, it's not like this was just handed to you. I mean, one, yes, you had to work very hard, but I don't know, as a kid, did anyone in your family say, hey, she's going to be chief of staff for a mayor one day?
Oh, Lord, no. No, I grew up in a trailer park in the middle of a tobacco field. My grandparents still live there. When I go home to North Carolina to visit them, that's where my family and I stay. And I love it. I love my family in North Carolina. I love the humble upbringing that I had because humility is really important to me. The honesty that comes with having to work hard and having strong work ethic, I think, is irreplaceable, and it's really done me well.
And then, Sly, you also have a book out. I thought I just finished your other book, and then there's another book. And so, you know, you're just cranking them out. I mean, just prolific, if I could say that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I don't know if I go that far. Joni and I have going to have to do something together at some point, I think.
Yes.
Yeah, the opportunity agenda is it's really kind of an interesting story how that came about. Winston Fisher, the co-author, and I really have no reason to ever have met. Winston is a fairly high-profile real estate developer in New York. He has a new place in Las Vegas called Area 15 that he's operating. He's a young, aggressive, progressive white guy with sterling education, and then there's me. Somehow we got connected through mutual friends that had worked with me on my campaigns, and hit it off. So the book is really about trying to address the issues that we think are really critical for today's people in a very basic way, without government contracts or big government programs, but to really look at things that are going to have make a difference in lives, like quality childcare for women, so that they don't have to make a decision. I'm either going to have a career or I'm going to stay home. Quality pre-K for kids, so that they're able to compete down the road. Portable benefits infrastructure, doing things that will allow for the access of more capital for minority and women entrepreneurs who are creating jobs. These are important things that can and should be done. And frankly, we think that if the Democratic Party can make the center of their progression, that they will be able to stay in power for a long time, because they will be answering the needs of people, not talking politics, monetary policy, global finance, NATO, SMATO, G5, G4, G6, whatever, and really be addressing some needs, which is why I think we had the election that we had in 2016. People's needs weren't being met, and they were looking for any avenue to have those needs met. There's a way to do it, but you know, that's what the book's about, and that's why we hope it resonates with people.
So let's talk a bit about your agenda, both of you, and certainly some of the projects you're working on. Although I do want to follow up with that, Joni, because you're the communications expert, among many other things, and like everything Sly just described is something that I would hope most people want, and yet everything is getting lost in us versus them, and social media doesn't help. Sometimes I guess it can too, but I don't think that people half the time know what the difference between a bot is or this or that. I mean, I know from my standpoint, I'm just dealing with grumpy fans sometimes that don't like the result of a game, and I get that. And if it's malicious, I hit mute, and if it's really personal, I block them and I move on with my day. But people are reading this stuff and believing it. And when you boil it down to something as simple as what Sly said, who doesn't want better for their kids? Who doesn't want better education? Who doesn't want better health care? So how, from a communication standpoint, do you push aside the fighting? I don't know. Maybe it's always been this way. But Joni, how do you push through this?
Well, I think it's gotten worse. At least throughout my career, political discourse has gotten more polarized, more negative, and just kind of more stupid in general, I think. And I think you're right, Joel. Social media has had a huge impact in it. And it's interesting. I've seen that through things like Twitter, Facebook, you can engage more people in the process that haven't been engaged before. But it's really hard to have a cogent, substantive conversation about something like healthcare reform or, God forbid, the Second Amendment on these platforms where you can hide behind a keyboard. So I think one thing that we have to think about is having conversations that might be difficult, but in a civil way. It's one of the reasons why I joined the board of this organization called American Public Square. It's all about civil discourse and bringing people together who may not necessarily agree on every issue, but figuring out how to talk about it and how to forge some consensus. I can remember when I first started out in politics, Democrats and Republicans on the U.S. Senate floor going at each other in a debate, and in the evening having dinner together, drinking scotch and talking about their families. And that just doesn't happen as much anymore.
Yeah, I don't know why recently. Maybe I was looking for some more normal times, but I went back in the last couple of weeks and just started watching The West Wing again, which is, one of the great shows in history. And not that I have time for that, but just, I'm a glutton for punishment. I'll come home from a game, and instead of turning on other games and sports, and I'll do some of that, I want to get away from that. And so I end up checking out the politics for the day. And there just are certain nights where I'm like, I can't take it anymore. I enjoy that for the theater of it, not the craziness of it, but I enjoy, like, if I could go back, I would love to go back and study political science and things like that. I love the strategy of it. I think it's fascinating to me, in the same way that a manager in baseball lay out the chess pieces sometimes. So but it's tough to watch right now. It really is. And, I was thinking a little bit about this with social media too. Joni, we talk about that, and hang with me here, Sly. I think you'll follow this one, but we've been having this debate the last few days in baseball. The Royals have had a bunch of guys that were called out at second base trying to steal, and they were safe. But because of a technicality, popping up off of the bag, the foot lifts up for like a millimeter, and the glove is on them, and they're out. This was the Pandora's box of opening up instant replay. So we wanted to get all the calls right, and then it went from getting the calls that were egregiously missed to things that were never intended being reversed. So there's this Pandora's box to that, and I think there's this Pandora's box to social media of all those people that Joni referenced that are behind the keyboard. It's the old school letter to the editor. You get somebody grumpy that would send in the letter to the editor, or in my early TV days, they'd leave an angry voicemail, or they might even talk to you. Nobody needs to do that now. They can fire it off in 280 keys and be done with it. And Sly, I've seen some of the interactions you've had. You handle them well, but I don't know. It can get under your skin sometimes, or it can get under anyone's skin, and you just want to say, wait a minute, what is going on here? How have you handled that?
Well, we had to pass the no tweeting after two scotch rule in the office. That's a real rule. Because there were times after a couple of scotches and somebody had come after me, I was like, okay, I've had with you, fire back, and that just never works well. I look at it from the standpoint, I think that there are people out there, and one of the things that I've come to grips with, I used to think I'm a normal person. I'm just a regular, normal, average person. Most of the people I meet, I think, are normal, average, regular people. Therefore, all of us normal, regular, average people probably think relatively normal, similar thoughts. And then it was like, oh, hell no, you don't. There's no way that you do. You just have to get comfortable with the idea that not everybody thinks the same way. And you gather up those that you can and those that are on the periphery. And you try to form coalitions that are big enough to do things. But when you do, you need to be able to do it on a basis that is really somewhat unassailable, which is why I prefer facts and data as opposed to political ideology. You can justify a lot of stuff based on facts and data, if, of course, you can agree on what a fact is, versus political ideology. The things that we talk about in the book, the things that Joni talked about in her book, are not based on political ideology. Mm-hmm. They're based on common sense, pragmatic things. That if you are male in a male-dominated environment and you have any sort of respect for the females you work with, you will act and force others to act in a certain way. You won't let crap pass. You will call it out when you see it. If you are a person who cares about the future of this country, then we will talk about what's in the best interest of our children, because they're going to be the ones that are running it, hopefully paying the bills while we're in the nursing homes. Those types of things. Those are things that shouldn't have any political ideology to it. Those are pragmatic, self-interested things, to be quite honest. And if we miss those opportunities, then shame on us. If we allow others to blow past those opportunities without pointing out the opportunity in front of them, then shame on me, because we have a responsibility to each other to at least point out there's money on the table over there. You can pick it up if you want to, and you're foolish if you don't.
Well, I think right now too, and I put out this tweet over the weekend, and I was waiting to see if there were any replies. But and if you guys didn't see this, I'll share it with you. But Kirk Herbstreit, who's I think generally considered the top college football analyst in the country, and I mean, he was a quarterback back when I was in college. I went to Wisconsin. He went to Ohio State. I say that like we competed against each other. I wasn't a football player, but I was covering it and all that. And he was on their show the other day, and he broke down in tears following a conversation that he'd had with the football coach of Stanford. And essentially, he broke down in tears, saying, "Look, I don't have to send my kids out telling them the 2 and 10 rule or to not wear a hoodie or all this type of stuff." He said, "We need to be better. We need to start listening to each other." And so I tweeted that out, and I just said, "What, in a day and age where we hear everyone say stick to sports, why should they stick to sports? When you have comments like this why shouldn't we listen to this?" And I had a gentleman that replied back to me who said something about, "Well, I hope that you're willing to listen to both sides, including those of us in law enforcement." And I was ready to take the bait and say, wait a minute, that's not what I was talking about. But I think I said something like, absolutely, we need to do a better job of listening to each other. Thank you for your service. And yes, we do need to respect each other. And it was almost like there was a defense mechanism there. And
Yeah.
I was ready to go. And even after I sent what I did, I thought, did I clarify that this is what I was talking about? And I look back and I did. It was just one guy, but there was something to be said, Joni, about that immediate defense mechanism to something that was so simple as just, here's this passionate, beloved figure, I think, in terms of college football television, that suddenly just broke down crying. Like, where would the defense or the shot against that come? I think that's where we're at right now.
Yeah, and what you're describing hits at another concept I write about in the book, which is emotional intelligence. And that means when you have the ability to regulate your own emotions and help other people navigate their own sometimes complicated, complex emotions. And oftentimes in social media, it's almost designed to negate any sort of emotional intelligence that we might have.
You caught me in the middle of coffee there. It's that time of morning. No, it's okay. Okay, a few things as we wrap it up. I said I want to talk a little bit more. You guys have touched on it throughout this podcast, but Joni, what's number one, number two? What are your priorities right now in terms of endeavors?
Personally or professionally?
Either one.
I would have to say that my biggest priority right now is to continue to be a great business partner and to continue serving our clients with first-rate service and getting results while figuring out this crazy virtual school world and being present with my kiddo and helping her navigate all these complex, complicated emotions that a 7-year-old goes through when they can't go to school with their friends every day and all those interesting things.
And now you're speaking the language that almost everyone can speak. Any mom or dad is going through that in some form or another right now. There again, something that we can unite over, and instead of making it about masks and freedom, which by the way, I don't, that doesn't make sense. It seems like we're going back to seatbelts in the 70s or 80s when I'm not wearing, you can't tell me to wear my seatbelt. Anyway, I'm getting off on a tangent again. Sly, how about for you right now?
A couple of things. I fully agree with Joni. It's good to be partners with her. We're going to keep that going. But to me, that's a given. Our goal right now, my goal right now is a couple of things. Number one, I'm really focusing more and more on the issues related to education. And that's very important, because I think really when we talk about issues of social justice and equity, for African Americans and immigrants and poor people, education is the most foundational part of rebuilding and getting out of those situations that are inequitable, or actually to avoiding them all along. So I really focus on education. But, I'm at an age now where I'm really starting to say, okay, I don't have a bucket list. I would never want to have a bucket list. To me, the more things you strike off your bucket list means the closer you are to death. So I'm not doing that. But I'm trying to do those things that make me feel good. For example, I can't watch really serious movies anymore. I used to really like action movies. Now I really kind of almost have to watch comedies, because there's enough action and strife in the air already. So I'm watching comedies. Learning how to play the bass. Need to spend more time with that, because I really love the concept of playing something or being on the stage and singing, that type of thing. But at the end of the day, what I really want to see is I want to find ways that we can help bring people together over common issues and move the ball forward in some sort of a positive way, with or without politicians, because I'm concerned about this country at this moment. I really am concerned about it. We're at each other's throats. And the next time that there's a reason for protest, I'm concerned that there may be more shootings, and then the thing will just escalate out of control. And if there's nobody who's going to put a lid on this and stop it and slow it down and get people talking to each other, then we're going to be in trouble. I'm not a person who believes that because we're the United States of America, we are somehow immune to what's happened to governments throughout history. We could fall just like they did. And if we're not vigilant, we will. And that bothers me a lot. I've got grandkids. Everybody here has kids. We want our kids to inherit something better than what we've gotten. Right now, there's some serious fissures in the landscape that aren't being patched up by leadership. And that's what I'm concerned about. And that's a focus for me right now.
Do you think, I'll still get back to this, this does not have to be a left versus a right. I mean,
It shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. It is. There are liberals and conservatives that could all agree on democracy and the
Right.
foundation of this country. Are there a lot of people out there, do you think, that are in agreement with everything you're saying but are afraid to speak out? I mean, what's
the rule that we learned, Joni? That the loudest voices are usually the negative people, and they are seldom the majority. Seldom the majority. They're just negative people in the minority are always loud. As a matter of fact, we had a name for them. We call them cave people. Cave people, or it's CAVE, cave people, CAVE, citizens against virtually everything. At the end of the day, there's people out there that agree with basic concepts, but what I think is missing is they have no real way of getting together in order to expand on those. Where's the mechanism for people in California, Milwaukee, Florida, Wisconsin, Kansas City, who believe in X, to actually expand that? That's one platform that social media could accomplish, but even then what you get is you get a bunch of trolls and you get it all messed up and you get a bunch of arguments. We need to find a way for people to understand that they really are in control of this government and to push agendas that are in their best interest. Kind of sounds like a political party, but it shouldn't be.
Well, you said something, I never thought about it in terms of cave people, but I learned a lot of years ago that what was being said on social media, say about anything baseballers, we're not talking about anything as serious as, what's going on in the country, but was not representative. Like I'd hear these statements over and over again, complaining about a specific player. This is the worst this is the worst that. And then I'd go home and talk to family or relatives, around town or friends, and they'd say, huh? I'd say, wait a minute. And I always thought, what you hear or read, what you hear on talk radio, what you read on Twitter or the comment section might represent 5% or 10% if you were to go poll any section at the stadium of what people actually thought. And so that's almost to me when I put on the blinders and said this stuff, and I'm not saying ignore it, but I think that there is context to it, or at least understanding how weighted it is, and all of that negativity can just pull everybody down with it. So I just, as you said that, it made me think about something I learned a long time ago. Final thoughts here, Joni. Do you have hope? You guys are making inroads here, and the issues that you're tackling, and certainly the book is included in that. Do you feel like we're moving in some type of a good direction?
I think we are in some ways. I think what we need is more brave people to speak out about some of the craziness that we're seeing on both sides of the aisle, honestly. But yeah, I think there are glimmers of hope.
I do too. I think we've probably always in the course of history taken steps backwards to go forwards. I hope that's what this is right now. Sly, I'll leave the final thought to you. Although we also should give a shout out to our friend, because I know he'll be watching this, or at least he'll be watching the link later, and the leader of a group that the two of us are in, the Heartland Heroes. And so I just wanted to give a shout out to Steve, because he will. I don't think I gave him the link to this beforehand, so I will hear it from him on that one. I'm sorry, Steve. But he will also want to see this and hear it, because he has been a guy, and I won't get into all the specific details, that has really helped promote discussion within the people within our group too. And so that gives me hope too, is that people are willing to talk and listen.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Steve's a good man, and I've very much appreciated the opportunity to join that group, especially with you, and it's great. But I'll just leave it with a motto that Joni and I have adopted because it's a necessary adaptation. It's improvise, adapt, and overcome. Regardless of the circumstances, you improvise, you adapt to those circumstances, and then you overcome. That's what I live by, and that's the only way I can see the world. For me, to do anything other than that means that you don't improvise, you don't adapt, and you don't overcome, and that's unacceptable.
Well, I want to remind everyone, we got a few websites to promote here. Wickham-James.com first and foremost. So if you want to learn more about this dynamic duo and what they are doing in the world, and so many important issues that you guys are working on, you can check that out at Wickham-James, and then definitely grab the book. I've got to read this one, Joni, and I'm really interested. Anything leadership I'm interested in, and really want to, beyond just the catchy title, of course, the thin line between cupcake and bitch, taking action, driving change, getting results. I want to read it. I know my wife wants to read it, so we will check that one out. And then I've already read Sly's book before that one, which was so kindly autographed to me too. Thanks, Sly, for that. The Opportunity Agenda, a bold democratic plan to grow the middle class. So I hope everyone will check those out. You can find those books anywhere that you get books. Amazon's always a good one, or wherever you go and do that. So Sly and Joni, thanks so much for spending the time today. Enjoyed it as always. And just lay off that Twitter after those two scotches.
Yeah, frankly, it's a real good excuse for me to have the two scotches earlier in the evening than I normally would.
You and I have too much in common, that is for sure. All right, Sly, thank you. Joni, thanks for spending the time.
Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Appreciate it, brother.
All right, great to visit with both Sly and Joni. What an awesome partnership that is. I do want to thank a couple of my sponsors, KCAV, Kansas City Audio Visual, for the studio. They do much bigger work than this, but check them out at kcav.com, and to my partners at Enterprise Bank and Trust for continuing to give me this platform, to help me with this platform. I'm going to take this platform no matter what, but to have a partner like that says, hey, go out there and talk about these issues. We want to be involved. I'm really grateful for that, and grateful to all of you for watching. Hope to see you tomorrow on Round of the Bases Live, presented by Enterprise Bank and Trust. #NoStoppingYou. I'm Joel Goldberg. Have a great rest